Have you ever traveled to a country that uses different measuring systems than you're used to? For example, let's say they use grams, but you're used to ounces. Or maybe they use kilometers, but you're used to miles. Or maybe sometimes you just wonder how many seconds there are in a year. Scientists have to convert units all the time. Sometimes it's converting from one system to another, or other times it is converting within the same system, but from a bigger unit to a smaller unit. So unit conversion is super important. And one of the cool ways of doing that is by using dimensional analysis, which is also sometimes called factor labeling method. I know, fancy terms, but let's see what they mean. And let's do that by directly taking an example. So here's the first one. Convert 0.764 kilometers to meters. Now, some of us might be able to do this in our heads, but the whole idea is to try to learn how to do this systematically using dimensional analysis so that we can apply that same method for even more complicated conversions that are hard to do in our head, okay? So let's do this systematically. What is given to us is we need to convert from kilometers to meters. So our first step is to identify an equation that connects these two units, that connects kilometers and meters. And this is on us. We need to know that, okay? Now, a kilometer to meter, well, we know that. Kilo stands for 1,000. So 1 kilometer is 1,000 meter. That is the connection between them. That is the equation. All right, once we have this, we start by writing down what's given to us. What's given to us is 0.764 kilometers. So let's write that down. The next step is the important one. You multiply this with a conversion factor that you create from this equation. We also call this equality or equivalency for that matter. But how do you do that? How do you create a conversion factor? Here's how we can do it, okay? Since you have a kilometer and 1,000 meters, one conversion factor you can create is 1,000 meters divided by a kilometer, okay? So you can multiply it by this conversion factor, 1,000 meters divided by 1 kilometer. Look, in this conversion factor, this is in the numerator, this is in the denominator, right? Another conversion factor is the other way around. You can put this in the numerator, this in the denominator. When you do that, you get 1 kilometer divided by 1,000 meters. Both are correct conversion factors. But then comes the big question, which one do we use over here? Well, we use the one which is going to help us cancel kilometers and make sure you end up having a meters in the numerator. So let's see if this one does that, okay? So if you look at the 0.764 kilometers, that's actually in the numerator because I can write that as, that divided by 1. So if you look at it, does this help us in canceling the kilometers? No. The result would have a units of kilometers square per meter, which is not what we want. If I want the kilometers to be cancelled, I want the kilometer in my conversion factor to be in the denominator. So that's how I understand that this is not the conversion factor I should be using. I should use the other one. I should use the conversion factor in which the 1,000 meter is in the numerator and the kilometer is in the denominator, because then the kilometer cancels out and I'll end up with a meter. Does that make sense? That's basically how we do this. So we can go ahead and cancel this out. And now we're left with 0.764 times 1,000 divided by 1, which you can plug it into a calculator, or we can just do this in our head now. This is 764. So we end up with 764 meters, and that is our answer. The final step is to ensure we have the right amount of significant figures. You should have the same amount as the number of significant figures over here. So how many significant figures do we have? Well, 3, because remember, leading zeros do not count. So we need to have 3 significant figures, and that's exactly what we have. But wait a second, what about the 1 kilometer equals 1,000 meters? Doesn't that have significant figures? Shouldn't we worry about that as well? No, because it's an exact amount. A kilometer has exactly 1,000 meters. That's how we define a kilometer. It's not something that's measured. So for metric conversion factors, we don't have to worry about significant figures. There could be significant figures for other conversion factors, but don't worry about them for now. All right, next question. Express 12.8 meters in kilometers. Why don't you pause this video and try this yourself first? Okay, so this time we have to convert from meters to kilometers. So again, the first step is to identify an equality that connects meters and kilometers. And that's the same thing that we saw before. A kilometer equals 1,000 meters. You could have also written this as 1,000 meters equals a kilometer. It doesn't matter. It's the same thing. Next step is to write down what's given to us. What's given to us is 12.8 meters. So let's write that down, 12.8 meters. And then you have to multiply this by a conversion factor that we create from this. And how do you do that? Well, one conversion factor is you put this in the numerator and this in the denominator, giving you 1,000 meters divided by a kilometer. Let's see if that works. Does this work? Well, no, because we want the meters to cancel out. That means we want the meter in our conversion factor to be in the denominator and the kilometer to be in the numerator. So we should just do it the other way around. 1 kilometer should come in the numerator and 1,000 meters should come in the denominator. And that's how you do it. So you see, you just pick the conversion factor that allows you to cancel the unit that you don't want and gives you the unit that you want in the numerator. Okay, so now we can go ahead and cancel this. Meters get canceled. And we now end up with 12.8 times 1 divided by 1,000. We might want to put this in our calculator, so let's just do that. So 12.8 times 1 divided by 1,000. And there you have it, 0.0128 kilometer. So that is our answer. The last step is to check for significant figures. There are 3 significant figures over here. We want to make sure that there are 3 significant figures. Yes, there are, because leading zeros don't count. There you have it. Now, before moving on, one question we might be having is, instead of using 1 kilometer equals 1,000 meters as our equality, why can't we use 1 meter equals 0.001 kilometer as our equality and then use that to create conversion factors? Can we do that? Short answer, yes, you can. But when you're dealing with decimals, it's just there is more chances of having errors. So we usually like to avoid decimals in our equality. It just keeps things simple. That's it. Less chances of making mistakes. But technically, yes, we can do this and we can create conversion factors out of this and we should get the same answer. Feel free to try that because it's always fun to do all of those things, but usually we'll stick to doing these. We'll try to use our equalities or conversion factors that go from little to big, okay? Okay, on to the next question. How many seconds are in 42.5 minutes? Well, again, what is given to us? We are given 42.5 minutes and we have to convert that into seconds. So we need an equality that connects minutes and seconds. And we know that 1 minute equals 60 seconds, right? So next step, write down what's given to us. That is 42.5 minutes that's given to us. We need to multiply this with a conversion factor that we can create from this. Again, feel free to pause this and try this on your own first. Okay, so the conversion factor can be, again, let's just think about this. We can either have 1 minute divided by 60 seconds, or we can have 60 seconds divided by 1 minute. Which one should we use? Well, I want to cancel minutes. So I want the minute in my conversion factor in the denominator, not this one. So I want the seconds in the numerator. So it should be 60 seconds divided by 1 minute. So the minute cancels out. And now we can plug this in our calculator. 42.5 times 60 divided by 1. That gives me 2,550 seconds. That is our answer. Finally, we have to check for significant figures. There are 3 over here. How many do we have? Well, we have 3 significant figures over here. Because remember, trailing zeros at the end of the measurement don't count if there are no decimal points. So this doesn't count. And so this is our final answer. Okay, one last. The distance between Dallas and Houston is 272 miles. What is this distance expressed in kilometers? Okay, again, what's given to us? Well, we are given 272 miles and we need to convert that into kilometers. So we need, again, an equality that an equality between kilometers and miles. And that equality is 1 mile is 1.61 kilometers. So we're going to use this to create a conversion factor now, okay? So the first step is we write down what's given to us, 272 miles, multiply this with the conversion factor, and by now we know that our conversion factor should have miles in the denominator to cancel this, and kilometers in the numerator, so I end up with kilometers. So I put this in the numerator, this in the denominator to create my conversion factor, 1.61 kilometers divided by 1 mile, and we can now cancel the miles and plug this in our calculator. 272 times 1.61 divided by 1. And that gives me 437.92 kilometers. Ooh, what about the significant figures over here? Well, there are 3 significant figures, so I need to round this off to 3 significant figures. Currently, I have 5. So how do you round this off? Well, I'm going to look at this digit to round off this digit. So I can get rid of this. I don't have to worry about that. So if the digit is more than 4, we round this up. So since it's 9, we round this up to 8. So this becomes 438 kilometers. That is our final answer. So long story short, when we want to convert from one unit to another, the first step is to write the equality between those two units. Then write down what's given to us, multiply it with a conversion factor that you can create from the equality. Make sure that in your conversion factor, the unit that you don't want, that gets canceled out, and that's in the denominator, and the unit that you want, it's in the numerator. And then finally, plug everything into the calculator, get your final answer, make sure that it has the same number of significant figures as the one that's mentioned in the question.